When it comes to Halloween Horror Nights, there are many factors that make this event truly a spectacle to see. From the ambience, the lighting, the fog, monsters that roam around, there is one big thing that makes this truly unique and different from any other haunt event out there. And that is the variety of locations that they are able to use. From the sound stages to tents to parade buildings to the newly acquired house queues. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the newly revamped San Francisco location, the Fast and Furious building that houses a haunted house, at least for the last couple years. What do I like about it? What don't I like about it? And what is very fascinating about this queue space? And so our video about the Fast and Furious location goes way back. This is some cool history for you. Halloween Horror Nights 25. What a damn good year. Probably one of their best. I need to make that video about what are the best years of Horror Nights. Remind me about that. So that year was the first time Horror Nights stepped up its house count. And that year they actually went with 9 houses. Previously they had 8. They decided to go with 9. So they needed obviously the space to put these houses in. Back then they just didn't have these extra buildings they could just pop up. They didn't have all the extra parade buildings that they have now. Disaster or earthquake, they were already using that extra queue space to build houses in. But this is where things kind of got interesting. So they also, for the first time, used the Shrek Theater with Asylum in Wonderland 3D. And then in the disaster queue, they were using Blood, Sweat, and Fears. Now, this is at the point disaster was going away, and they announced that Fast and Furious was going to be coming to Universal Orlando. So Fast and Furious was actually announced to be coming to Universal Studios Florida on August 25th, 2015. That's crazy to think it was way back like that. And it had planned to open in 2017, but then it was pushed back to 2018. We're obviously doing construction on Fast and Furious and building and stuff. So we couldn't have a house there. So that's where the Shrek Theater kind of took its place. In the meanwhile of having Krampus, and you had Saw was there. We had Killer Clowns from Outer Space. That was a good house in there. Very good. And then everyone's favorite was Case Files. Unearthed Legendary Truth was the last house to be in the Shrek Theater, because then they were able to move everything back over to using the Fast and Furious location. They figured out a way. And that's what brings us to our first house that we were talking about. And that was at Halloween Horror Nights 31. They decided to bring back the Fast and Furious location with the Horrors of Blumhouse. Now, when we knew this was going into this location, it was a little confusing because we couldn't quite understand how this was going to fit into this house. Was we going to go to the pathway of the attraction itself, the queue space? Like, how was this going to work? And then we slowly started seeing the construction and sort of figuring out how they did it. So they used some of the queue space. They pretty much block it off, and you go into a certain pathway through the regular queue space, and then you go through a hallway outside, and then there is a point of transition where you go into another part, which is like the tent part. Very interesting of how they do it. Now, I've never seen this done in a house. Usually the only house I think they've done this for is like Halloween, they had sort of a 2 setup, and American Horror Story kind of had 2 facades in one. This is not technically a facade, but it is sort of breaking the part in part 1 and part 2 being freaky, and then the other one being the black phone portion. So really done uniquely, even though a lot of people do not like this setup. They don't like this house cue. They think it's terrible. They don't want it to be used until a little bit later on. We'll talk about that upcoming. And then fast forwarding to Halloween Horror Nights 32, the very next year, we had a big mega IP.
What better way to celebrate my TV series Chucky than to let my fans step inside the madness? They can't get enough Chucky.
And Chucky's Ultimate Kill Count. Quite not an interesting pathway, because they kind of did the same pathway. They didn't change it up. We technically went the same way. You went through the queue, then this time at least they fixed the projection of it. Instead of it being on the top of the wall, they put it onto the door itself. Same house layout, nothing really changed about this. They followed the same schematics. And I think it proved something. Putting an IP in this location is not a good idea. I think it's just not a good idea, because this house filled up. And I remember multiple times of not being able to do this house, because if I didn't do Stay and Scream and saw it, I darn sure wasn't going to come back to this house way later in the night when this line was constantly 60 minutes, 70 minutes, 80 minutes. I was not going to wait that long to see Chucky. Sorry, Chucky. And especially knowing that this house was not good, I was damn sure not going to wait that long to see this house. But yeah, nothing really interesting about the layout. Like I said, the same as the previous year. But who knew that would all change when it came to Halloween Horror Nights 33? Yes, they brought us to Major Sweets Candy Factory, and things got, well, let's say a little interesting. We were going the regular pathway, and I kept noticing, well, they're not using that same way, so where's the house at? Lo and behold, they switched it up. For the first time in them using this location, they actually figured out a unique and better way to use it. I can't quite tell you the schematics of how they did it. I know you go outside in a portion of the start of the house, but I do not know where they fit this in. But something changed. They actually closed the Fast and Furious location for the entire time that they were doing the Horror Nights. So they closed it early and started construction somewhere, I guess in the queue space or the ride space or somewhere. Quite interesting of how they built it. I do not know. I would love to ask somebody like to see the actual space. It's truly unique. And I think they finally figured it out. 1, they gave us a facade for this house. 2, they gave us an original property in this house versus something like an IP. It still felt really cool. It felt like a smaller candy factory. So it uniquely, I think, executed what it was promising. But that brings us to the sad news in Halloween Horror Nights 34, where construction has started. We previously talked about it on the last video, and we are going down the same pathway as the first 2 houses in this location. So back through the queue space with the weird transition, and maybe rumored to be an IP in this property. I think those are 2 strikes that it's quite awful in this location, where you're just going through the regular queue space of seeing Fast and Furious, and then you turn the corner and you're like, oh, there's no facade. Like, it's just a projection. Do you like this location, or do you feel like this is going to be weird? That is it. Thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for the support on the channel. Peace out, everybody. And see you in the fog. Yeah.